You're listening to Don't IEP Alone with special education advocate Lisa Leitner. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa.
Hey, I'm Lisa Leitner, and welcome to part 2 of the interview with Maria. Sometimes when these podcasts get a little bit long and get into the interviews, and people like us, we can talk about this stuff all day long. But when it starts to get a little bit long, we divide it into 2 episodes. So that's what we've done here. So enjoy part 2 and enjoy the rest of your day. Anything that we reference will be in the show notes, or you can always look on adayinourshoes.com. You touched on a little bit, you mentioned the word permissive parenting, things like that. So, I mean, let's just get it out there, right? Like, so what you said, like, I'm all in. I've been doing this long enough that I know that, like, it's a thing and, you know, like, it's real and there's the science and the data behind it, that this is where, I mean, this is just where I think society's headed, right? Like, because we are going to follow the science. Like, it's just that's what we do. Yeah. But there's still those anchors behind us. You know, I think of it like almost like a tug of war pulling back, saying, no, they just need to listen. And this is hippie stuff. And this is touchy feely, you know, permissive parenting. So what do you want to say to that? Or what could you say to those who, and even maybe some tips let's take, for example, the mom who is struggling with all the things that you mentioned, right? She's having these constant battles with her kid and she's just kind of at her wit's end and thinks, oh, let me try this. Speaks with her spouse and he's like, you don't need that. He just needs to listen. He just needs to, you know, I think of, you know, the 1950s or even maybe the 1980s or 90s, you know, you smack the kid up the side of the head who has ADHD and say, pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, if only it were that simple, right?
Right. And isn't that terrible? But yes, it's hard. And I do see that a lot. I do work with a lot of mothers who love their husbands and they don't come in and badmouth, but they say, we're struggling in our relationship and I am having a hard time conveying, like, he's not buying into this. And it's just a challenge. I think it's really the same answer. It's not giving up, but chipping away at it little by little. And my hope is that the more I educate the moms and they can start to sprinkle, you know, tidbits into conversation with their spouses or partners, and also maybe demonstrate, like, get a better result right in front of their partner who it might click a little bit, like, oh, it did take an extra 10 minutes, but because she sat down and showed that she actually showed some compassion and he still put on his shoes, but nobody was screaming. He was calmer faster than, you know, when I yell. And that's going to take time. But I think that seeing it, if the mother can start modeling it, hopefully dad will pick up on it. And a lot of the moms will say, oh, he needs to come see you. He needs to come talk to you. And the most recent thing I've done is create a hybrid program of parent-child, like a parent-child 6-week session, which still is mostly moms, and they can join exceptional moms for like 4, you know, they get 4 sessions, and then I work with the child in a small group for 6 sessions. But some moms are saying, well, could we do a separate session outside of exceptional moms and my husband will come? So I'm just starting to do those kind of things. So, you know, I think it's a challenge. It's an uphill battle. But my hope is the more people that are educated, it will start to spill over a little bit. And if I get to work with people directly, I'm hoping that I can, you know, get buy-in. But I think the data too, you can't argue with data and science. And this is where the science is leading us.
It is. So speaking of, you are speaking at a conference next month already. God, February is already next month.
I know.
So tell us about that.
Yes, it's a PESI workshop online. It's a self-regulation workshop for professionals or parents in regards to working with children who have ADHD, autism, anxiety within the self-regulation realm. It'll have a lot of, you know, good information and science and strategies packed in there. So that's on February 9th. It's virtual, and you can, if you were interested in it, you can find it on the PESI website.
And PESI is, for people who don't know?
It's a continuing education organization. They have everything from nurses to psychologists to counselors to therapists, constantly doing workshops and educating other professionals on a myriad of clinical and educational topics.
I've just witnessed over the years, it's heartbreaking. The kids who need emotional regulation skills, like especially the older ones, like it's so socially ostracizing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to be friends with the 8th grader who cries in the middle of class. Like it's just, that's, good, bad, otherwise. That's just where we are. Like, that's just, and my heart just breaks for them because they don't want to be doing that, but they can't, and keeping in mind that it's not always just negative emotions. I've had older kids who are like way too happy at things and they're like, oh, he's acting like a baby. Like, why is he so excited about this? And it's like, and again, it's that socially ostracizing piece that nobody wants to be friends with them because of that. And
especially if they're mixed in, regular education classes with some special ed and they're on the more immature side emotionally. And I think, and that's when, same thing as parents, teachers, which I know are also very overwhelmed, but if you have a kid like that in your class, try, everything is about consciousness and awareness, right? If you become aware, we can't change anything until we become aware of it.
Right.
So being intentional about noticing, oh, could I take 2 minutes and try to help this kid? Like, who's the nicest kid in the class? Who's willing to maybe pair up with him and play cards? Something like that. If educators would take that extra step when they can, that would be so helpful. Just like parents, when they can, even when they're tired and overwhelmed, take the extra step to ask for a play date or look into an activity. I think that's what the best we can do for those kids who are in those situations. And then I would say also to the parents, back to if you're really hung up on my kid isn't fitting in to normalcy or the regular quote unquote social climate, really then when you do take that extra step, that's when you want to try to find a kid like yours. Because then if they're still sort of on the outside at school, if they're at least getting that connection somehow, some way with a kid who's also even if they're not, I don't mean to be funny, but crying together, but you know what I mean? Right. Birds of a feather flock together, and it feels that's good. If that's the way that kid needs to relate to somebody that's like him or her, then they should have that.
Yeah. And I have one child who is neurotypical and one who is not. And those are the kinds of conversations I try to have with him in the car. Like, he'll relay a story to me and there's all kinds of bells and whistles going off because I'm like, oh, I know what's going on here. Like, because I've had those kids as clients and trying to probe that. Well, what did you do? And how did you react? And did you maybe try to, if he doesn't have any friends, did you try, and it's hard. It's hard because no, I'm not sitting with him at lunch. And I'm like, but you know, you don't necessarily have to sit with him at lunch, but maybe you could sit with, and now he's in high school, but you don't have to sit with him at lunch, but maybe you could sit next to him on the floor at circle time, because others will follow your lead,
Yes. And I would say it's so worth it to keep having those conversations, because in the moment, our kids might say, no, I'm not doing that, and I don't care. But what you're saying is sinking in, and it's more likely that they may actually take your advice, even though it doesn't sound like it. So don't give up and keep having those conversations. And if you're a parent listening and you haven't been talking about this stuff, but it's a concern, start talking about it. And even if they seem very reluctant, just keep chipping away at it and giving little examples and helping them gain some insight into what's going on in these interactions.
I mean, I love car talks more than, we're at the point now where
it's the time, right?
I know it is, and a lot of parents complain about, I have to drive him here and drive him there and everything. I'm like, I love this time. Like, we're at the point now where we're looking at, he's going to be driving himself soon. And yes, that will be a relief to not have to go out in the cold, dark night and all that. But at the same time, like that car time is so valuable.
Yeah, it is. And it's teenagers and older kids are harder to connect to, neurodivergent, neurotypical, right? It's like they get to that age. And I don't think my 15-year-old has told me how he feels in quite some time, even though I'm always asking. He's like, Mom, stop.
I know.
But
I'm fine.
yeah. But back to why the co-regulation works. I didn't even though I've been an OT for years, I wasn't thinking about parenting from that perspective either.
Right.
Until the last, few years or so. I was so focused myself on the kids I was working with, right? And consulting with parents here and there, but not thinking about that the way we show up, and not just the calm, but that little bit of compassion where you're still saying, hey, I expect this of you, or I would like to see this, but you're a good kid. And I see you, and they feel like if we're always like, you didn't do this and it comes from fear, it comes from love, right? It's us worrying, but it comes across as you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I think the statistic on an ADHD kid being corrected or told they did something wrong, I forget the number, but it's really high.
It's crazy
really
high.
Yeah, crazy high, like a certain amount of times a day. So to make them feel like you are a good kid and be pointing out the positives while we're helping them learn and grow is so important too. And that's all part of co-regulation. And I've seen that with my son, because I try to work on my fear. And okay, you missed this assignment and you lost this again because he's got the ADHD. But I'm now like, hey, I try to really build him up, and our kids need that.
Right.
So I just see, as to why should people buy into this? If you try it, give it a try. And doesn't mean, again, you have to get rid of all your rules, but try looking at your kid as a human being and take your fear away and just see them and encourage them maybe the way you would encourage somebody else's kid, because it's often easier because we're not so emotionally tied in, which comes back to the fear. So I just think I see my son opening up. I see him, not all the time, but I see positive changes in our interactions from changing my way of relating to him.
It definitely does work. And I know from personal experience that too often the skill set deficiencies that are associated with ADHD are so often portrayed as character flaws rather than what it is just a skill set deficiency because my brain is wired different, so that's a very heavy burden to carry, to think that I'm wrong and why can't I do this? Everybody around me is doing this. Why can't I do it? I must be bad. And it's a lot.
Yes. That internal guilt and shame and the being corrected all the time. So if that's what you're hearing from teachers and that's what you're hearing from your parents, even though your parents love you so much and actually they're really just worried, but all of you didn't do this and you didn't do that and all of that, of course, it's going to pile on. And so, that's a big concern of mine too in more recent years, just the shame like everybody talks about, and the shame comes from the lack of executive functioning. But while we're making sure that kids are more organized and giving them visuals and all the compensatory techniques, we've got to be talking to them about you are a good kid and you are smart and you can succeed. Yes, it's harder. Yes, we have to put some different things in place than other kids might have to do, but you are capable. We have to, I just think the shame component isn't talked about nearly enough, and it needs to be.
Yeah. We just had the other day, it was the first day back after break. My son texted us. He had forgotten some sports stuff for after school. And he said, I forgot. Can you bring it to me? And it was like this is just, I guess, where we are. But like my husband and I had to have this whole conversation about, we know that if we don't take it to him, the coach is going to make him run laps or do push-ups or both or run suicides, whatever that is. But we know that there's something there that, he's going to suffer the quote unquote consequences. He doesn't have ADHD or any executive functioning deficits that are visible. But we had to have this whole conversation of, do we let him suffer the natural consequences or we just hop in the car and take it to him? And it was just like, you know what? He was just off school for almost 2 weeks and he's a good kid otherwise. And he's a straight A student. And it's the first day after break and he forgot his stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So, and you're saying, and he doesn't have ADHD and you're like saying to yourself, why you almost thought about not to hurt him, but should we let him experience so he'll learn, right? So next time he won't forget.
Right.
But even with the ADHD kids, and like I said, I've gone through this with my son where I I mean, I would still get frustrated, but like he's lost a basketball like 50 times. Like I keep buying them and he takes them to the park and he forgets them and loses them. So I'm trying to help him learn, but I used to, I think, speak to him in a way that was just more blaming than I wanted to sound. And that's something I noticed, again, became aware of. And that's just one example, but I think it's okay. There's a fine line with ADHD kids with the bailing out. You can't expect regular results as far as like, you forgot your stuff again. Like
Right.
It's a brain, they're working memory. They're going to have challenges.
Right.
You should set up things to help them though. So you want them, and then you can't also just enable them and always bail them out either. So it's a balancing act, but
It is.
yeah, for sure. Kids just sometimes need a break. They just need a break and they just need you to make them feel good.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yep.
Make them feel like they're great. Goes a long way.
So, and he's hard on himself too. So, which we forget that kids are like, we think we're the only ones who are hard on them. And many times in their own heads, they're way harder on than themselves than we are.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Especially the perfectionists, or if they have anxiety and they're straight A students and they feel they already internally, the way they're wired is, I have to be perfect, or, I really, really worry about those kids. So they especially need to be told it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you for being here today. We're going to include it in the show notes, but quickly tell us where we can find you.
My website, insyncand.social.com, IN-SYNCAND and the word social, and everything. There's a contact form on there and all the services are listed.
Okay. And you're on Facebook
and Instagram as well, and LinkedIn.
Okay, great. And like I said, the information for those of you listening will be included in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Don't IEP Alone with special education advocate Lisa Leitner. We're so glad you've joined us and would love to connect with you outside of the show. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. From self-care tips to common IEP mistakes, there's even more to explore. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, don't IEP alone, and you don't have to.